Hello, hello, hello. Oh, there it is. All right, everybody, thank you for coming out. We're gonna go ahead and get started. My name is Jesse Eiliff. I'm Executive Director of Seven River Association, coming up on 16 months on the job. And I have a few updates I wanted to share with you guys before we get started with our very special guest here. Our mission, as many of you know, is to connect with people that live, work, and play on the Severn River to restore and protect it for all of our communities. So what we're doing here tonight is part of that connect piece, but we've also launched our floating classroom program, which gets students and children from the city of Annapolis out on the water, learning about water quality and interacting with the river like they might not otherwise have the opportunity to. We have a restoration grant that we just found out about. We won a grant from the Bay Trust for $35,000 to design some stormwater practices in the Georgetown East community in Annapolis. We have 4 more in the works for this summer that should far surpass all of what we were able to net last year in grants. And so we have a lot of irons in the fire on the restoration front as well. But all this is only possible from the support of folks in the room on Zoom. So if you're a member of SRA already, thank you very much. If you're not, I hope that you will derive some value from this and become a member. We're going to do something new with this speaker series we haven't done before and send around a survey to everybody who is registered after the presentation, where you can give feedback, and also there will be a link to donate. I hope that you'll do so. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand it off to Brian Gomes, our board member, to introduce our speaker. Brian, thank you.
Hey all, thank you for being here tonight. We are usually here on the 3rd Tuesday of each month, but we are working with ownership here to, there might be a little movement here as we come out of the summer into the fall, so stay tuned for that. But I can say with confidence, we will be having Nancy Lawson coming up as a speaker when we do come back together. So the author of Humane Gardener and the new book that's just come out. So we'll be having her talking about all things lawn and garden. Okay, without further ado, it's in size. I don't need my glasses. That's good. Marisa Olszewski joined Maryland League of Conservation Voters in 2022 to lend her experience to the advancement of positive environmental policies, regulations, and proposed legislation. Marisa's experience in Maryland environmental science and public education and outreach spans nearly 2 decades through roles in the Maryland Environmental Services, the Dundalk Renaissance Corporation, and the Robinson Nature Center, which is what I mentioned. Marisa has a passion for empowering people with science and advocating for a healthy environment for all Marylanders. Marisa earned a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies from Goucher College and a master's degree in environmental biology from Hood College. She lives in Sparrows Point with her husband and daughter. This is the environmental policy manager, Marisa Olszewski.
Thank you, Brian. And I do need to correct you. We met when I was working for Dundalk Renaissance Corporation.
Went up and back.
Working on putting oysters in Back River. So
We connected here. Yeah. Thank you.
all right. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. I've started doing the speaker route more to master naturalist classes. I'm actually a defunct master naturalist myself. But they still invite me to come talk to them. And the presentation I give to master naturalists that nobody else wants to give is the human impact on the environment presentation. So I try to put a lot of humor into it to make it fun and lighten it up a little bit and end on a positive note of what you can do. We're going to do the same sort of track here. We're going to start out just talking about state policy and state laws that passed through the General Assembly this last year, because in my role with Maryland League of Conservation Voters, that's a big portion of what I do and what we do as part of our mission. But then we're going to turn it, and the second part of my presentation is going to be very interactive. And we're going to talk about the whole, what you can do, what your community can do. And I love that Jesse already sort of kicked us off with some of the things that Severn River is doing, that will, you can use those as answers when those questions come. Okay. All right, so starting out, environmental policy, I'm going to give you the overview of what we're doing here. I'm going to talk to you about this last legislative session, a quick review. This is not a comprehensive review of all the environmental bills. We would be here for a while and it would get really boring. So I tried to pick out the highlights that I thought that they're either bills that were important to Maryland League of Conservation voters, they were on at the top of our list, or they had importance to water quality. So I wanted to bring that here. And so we'll start with the land and water conservation bill, then talk a little bit about climate resilience and justice. And in those, I will also talk about some of the things that were left undone that still need work for future that I see coming up again in future sessions. And then also because we have a whole new set of leaders statewide in the governor and comptroller and attorney general, I thought we'd just give a quick overview of what it looks like they've been up to in the last 6 months related to environmental policy. And then we'll have the fun part at the end where we'll talk about environmental practice, how we do it ourselves at home, how we're doing it in our community. And that will be super interactive. In fact, I have live polling that I've never tried, and we'll see how it works. Fingers crossed. All right. So let's start with land and water protection. And this year was a banner year for environmental bills in the General Assembly. We did really well. There were some bills that had been in the works for a couple of years and just hadn't quite made it there in past sessions. And this was the best session for them. And the first one that I have on this slide is one of those bills. Forest protection in Maryland had been, there had been efforts to change the forest conservation laws across the state for 7 to 10 years. They've been at it. And finally, we found the sweet spot. Senator Sarah Elfreth, who may be some of your senators, she did an amazing job championing this legislation and finding the way to build consensus and get this one through. So the updates to the Forest Conservation Act mean that we've set a statewide goal to actually increase our forest canopy, both in forests and in things like street tree canopy, general canopy. And I should say that in addition to Sarah's leadership, part of the reason that we saw this bill finally come to fruition this year is because the Hughes Center put out a study that came out at the end of last year in the fall. Anybody here read the Hughes Center study? Anybody attend a webinar about the Hughes Center study? Okay, good. Well, then I'll tell you all about it. It was commissioned by the General Assembly, and the Hughes Center is part of the University of Maryland system. They do agroecology research on the Eastern Shore, and they, along with Chesapeake Conservancy, partnered to map our forest canopy and also get historical data on Maryland forest canopy. And we're able to put together a study that showed that indeed we have been using our forest canopy. It had started to level off, but we were still losing. We hadn't quite made it to the plateau or even gain area. And in particular, as you might imagine, our central Maryland counties, as a result of development, were the ones under the most pressure that saw the most forest loss. So in addition to the statewide bill that passed, along at the exact same time, Montgomery County also updated their forest conservation law and actually put it into practice more quickly because the state bill was in the books, or it was on the way. So it updates the goal to increase forests, and it also brings up the standard for if forest is removed for development, then replanting has to happen at a 1-to-1 ratio before developers are able to get away with doing less than the same amount that they have taken down. And if we're going to increase canopy, we can't keep doing that. So for most projects, it will now be a 1-to-1 ratio across the state. And The other thing that this bill did was we really heard from counties that they needed flexibility when they were doing things like transit-oriented development projects. So we still want those to go through, and we want room for those. We want room for smart growth kinds of projects. So this gives them the flexibility to adjust where they're putting their tree canopy and their gains for forests, while also still moving us all forward and giving room for smart development projects. The other two bills are land preservation bills, and we had a lot of land preservation groups across the state come together to work on these. The first one, Maryland the Beautiful, is a fairly straightforward bill. It had come up last year, but not quite made it through. This is a bill that, if anyone's heard of the 30 by 30 initiative to preserve 30% of land by 2030, President Biden set it forward, and then other states started to try to follow suit. And so Maryland said, well, we could do 30%, but why stop there? We're going to go further. We're going to go big. So we said, well, the bill sets the goal of 30% of land conserved by 2030, but then also continuing that trajectory and going 40% by 2040. And if anyone follows E.O. Wilson, we're not quite at half Earth here with 40%, but we're getting there. So that would be great. And, you know, our water quality is dependent on what we're doing on land, as you all know, as a watershed association group. And so preserving land and forest cover is really essential to making sure that we're restoring our water and our waterways. The other thing, the other thing that bill does, it's really smart. It's one of the things that we heard from land conservation groups is that sometimes a piece of land comes up that might be available, but they don't immediately have the funds to get it before it gets picked up by a developer or something like that. And so this creates a revolving loan fund that those groups can access to quickly pick up that property. It's just a loan, and then they can pay that back in, and that loan fund continues for other pieces of property. Okay, and then the green space equity, this is a fun one. Last year, when we passed the Climate Solutions Now Act in Maryland, one of the things that was in that law was a definition for the terms overburdened and underserved. And that definition is partially mapped on MDE's website. If you want to go check that out. We also had an intern who helped to try to make a really thorough and final map of this for us this past year. And that's going to be housed on the Chesapeake Conservancy website because they have the GIS stuff on their website. They've got all the mapping tools. So there will be ways for you to check that out, but it's really quite significant how many areas across the state, when you drill in, are in fact overburdened and underserved. Because when you put all of the cumulative impacts of various pressures, environmental pressures together, it's actually quite a bit of our state. And so this bill uses those terms and says in areas that fit the bill that we've all agreed to are overburdened or underserved, let's put money into green space in those areas in particular. And this isn't a new pot of money. We're actually just shifting money that wasn't getting spent on rural legacy. So we had this rural legacy pot of money in open space, and it wasn't ever getting fully utilized. So this is taking those excess dollars and committing them to a specific area to still be used for the same function, but specifying where they're used. And this will help with things like everything from like urban gardens to also some of our older communities that weren't built with parks and that sort of thing, that they might be able to actually have some green space and land access. And talking about water, we had a sediment control bill go through this year. This was another one from Senator Sarah Alfred led on. And as you can see in this picture, this is the one that I got from one of our, I forgot to say that I am the Maryland State lead for the Choose Clean Water Coalition. It probably would have been helpful to tell you that before I tell you one of my members. So one of our coalition members sent me this picture when we were looking for examples of construction caused sediment and erosion in local streams. So this was that was a sediment plume that came off of a construction site that didn't thoroughly secure the sediment from eroding. And so this bill was trying to address the problems in construction sites and the amount of sediment coming off of them. And it's going to require some updates to what sites have to do if they're larger than, if they're 5 acres or larger. And it also has the requirement that Maryland Department of the Environment review the specs and what they're asking of sites every 5 years and updating those specifications so that hopefully we can get ahead of this and not end up with these sediment plumes. And then the other one, which I didn't work on this bill very much, I don't know a ton about it, but Kathy Klausmeyer, Senator Kathy Klausmeyer led on this one. It is the Restorative Aquaculture Pilot Program. And my understanding is that it was built off of a successful aquaculture program that was funded from some federal dollars. And that's the part where I'm going to get a little iffy because I don't know much more about it than that. Maybe somebody else in the room does. But it was going well. And so they said, let's put this into practice in Maryland. Let's at least try it out. And so this will give financial incentives to aquaculture practices like oysters because they are filter feeders and they are supporting that filtering of our bay water and really important for bay restoration. And it will give them some financial incentive for the work that they're doing, giving credit for that. So then we have climate, and of course, everything that we do in water quality is great, but if we can continue to not address our climate problems, then our water is still not going to our water restoration efforts are not going to succeed. These things are all tied together. We cannot disentangle them. And so Maryland League Conservation Voters has put a special emphasis on the climate work that we're doing at the state legislature right now. And these were a couple of the bills that we worked on this year that were successful. The offshore wind bill called the Power Act. It's really one of the follow-ups that came out of the Climate Solutions Now Act last year. Because if we're going to start working on decarbonizing our grid in Maryland, we need to also have places where we're producing carbon-free electricity. And we have the shoreline, and that is a really great place to get completely clean electricity. And so this bill looks at all of the sort of nitty-gritty technical details that need to happen to make that successful and make that happen more quickly. And it's looking at how we provide, I think, 8 gigawatts of energy that should be readily available offshore in Maryland. And put goals and planning in place for that. And then the community solar bill, this was one that was a pilot program. It went really well, and we needed to make it permanent so that it would be available to everyone and it could keep going. It would be more successful because more people would be able to subscribe to it, more solar developments would be able to take advantage of it. So community solar is the way that people can access solar electricity without having to put solar on your roof, or your roof could be part of a community solar project. There are lots of ways of doing community solar. There's no one way, but it's shared solar as a resource. And in Maryland, we wanted to make it available to moderate and low income households, especially as we're seeing solar energy as one of the energy sources that's actually lower cost than other energy sources at this point. We wanted to make sure that that was accessible. So they dealt with issues of third-party billing, just like you do now, where you can choose your electricity supplier. Community solar can show up on your bill as one of those sources of electricity. So that was great. And some more climate wins. I put clean cars in here, this is kind of unfair because technically it was an administrative rule. It wasn't the legislature didn't have to take any action on it because the governor moved on it. But it says that we're going to adopt the same sort of rules as California with moving forward with electric vehicles and trying to really fast track those electric vehicles, putting the regulations in place and the emphasis. And what I'll say here is when California goes first on these things, it's easy to follow them because California has the GDP of a country, more so than other countries. And so when they make rules that affect what businesses are going to do, then businesses just say, all right, we're just going to do that because in order to do business in California, which is a big part of our business, we'll just, follow suit. So in some ways, I feel like when we sign things like clean cars, it's very important to say, yes, we're on board and to continue the momentum there. But I also think this might have been happening anyway because California was already doing it. And I will also just say that, again, if we're going to reduce our emissions as a state, if we're going to be successful in that, we need to look at all the sources of emissions. And mobile sources are one of the largest, or the largest source of emissions. And one of the simplest ways that we have right now, if you're not going to stop driving, and we're not going to totally rebuild all of our communities so that you can stop driving, then the thing to do is put in place cars that don't have emissions. This is the direction we're going. Similarly, clean trucks and buses. This was legislation that was passed and will help to expedite getting more electric trucks on the road and also electric school buses. Both major sources of really high polluting emissions, and especially truck emissions tend to, that's where you get that particulate matter that's especially terrible for human health. And we see that communities of color and low-income communities are closest to the largest sources of that pollution. So this was also a really important bill in terms of equity, that we're addressing human health alongside our environmental goals.
But the governor, that's picture.
The governor hanging out in an electric car at MDE, that was where we announced clean cars. Right. So I said I'd talk about some unfinished business, and these were a couple of the bills that we were tracking, or a few of them that didn't quite make it through this year. And some of them tackle some really big topics, and again, they are looking at those definitions, overburdened and underserved, which are now codified into law, but they are new. And green space equity was really the first bill to utilize them since Climate Solutions Now. These bills, the first one has to do with permitting decisions and looking at cumulative impacts and getting MDE when they're considering a permit for new like industrial development, that sort of thing, to consider not just that single project, but the cumulative impact of that project alongside all of the other things that are already in that place and how that's affecting communities surrounding. So helping to really have a more comprehensive look at where we cite things and what we require of them. That bill got some hearings. There was some really good hearings on it, and I do imagine it's going to come back up next year. So look out for that again. And then the other one was empower reform. And this one, I felt like was a no-brainer, but I was wrong on this one. So empower reform didn't make it through this year. And I think there were a couple competing bills trying to address empower reform, which may have been what finally kept it from happening. But Empower is the program that we run through the utilities. It's the Public Service Commission required program for people, for ratepayers to have access to energy efficiency products. And maybe some of you have lived somewhere where a contractor for BTE knocks on your door and says, hey, you want some LED light bulbs? You want a new faucet for your shower, right? That's all part of the Empower program, trying to help people reduce their energy use, improve their efficiency. But in the Empower program, we still allow things like swap outs for gas appliances. And we were trying to tie the Empower program to our climate goals. So people should be able to access electrification and all electric appliances as part of the Empower program, because that helps to both reduce energy burden and switch over and off of fossil fuels. So those are things that we have as goals to move the Empower program for that in that direction. And again, this one's definitely going to come back up again this year. So if this is something you're interested in, watch out for it. There will be lots of opportunities to advocate. Okay. And I promised we'd talk about the state leadership. So Maryland Lead Conservation Voters, you may know us for our legislative scorecard, and that will be out later this summer, or toward the end of the summer, we'll have that out where we grade the legislature on how we feel like they did on our environmental priorities. We also, when there's a new administration, do a quick review at the beginning of the new administration to see how they are doing on their campaign promises. So we will have that out in the next, I'd say the next month. We're just finalizing the details on that document. So look out for a document reviewing the new gubernatorial administration. But I can say they've done pretty well. As we saw with clean cars, and they helped to advocate for the clean trucks rule. They have shown strong leadership in their appointments. We've got some really good appointments to DNR and MDE and ag and planning. I've already been working with MDE, and it's like a whole new day there. That they're much more open and willing to talk and work with people than they have been for the last so many years. And they supported a bunch of the environmental bills that went through the legislature this year, which was new and different. And they also have identified what they're calling their federal investment team. So in each of the departments where federal money from the Inflation Reduction Act or the bipartisan infrastructure law can be coming in and moving through Maryland, they've identified lead people in each of those agencies to keep track of that and to make sure that Maryland is staying on top of applying for those funds and getting them and utilizing them. We do also want to make sure that we're following up with them and making sure that they're going to keep doing the things they said they do. So they said they'd appoint a chief sustainability and resilience officer or a climate czar or some sort of title like that. And we're still waiting to hear on that appointment. They also, we are hoping to see them develop environmental justice plans across agencies. So having somebody in each agency who is aware of and paying attention to that, and then tracking across agencies as well. And then also, we want to see more effort put into supporting reskilling for clean energy jobs, because we want to be part of the clean energy economy and really see Maryland move ahead with that. The comptroller made some promises about working in this new world of climate and really thinking about climate as part of what her office does. And she in fact has started creating what she's calling a climate advisory council, and they will work with her, advise her on a climate sustainability plan for that office. And then this one's water related, but I found the Attorney General recently joined, or actually Maryland itself is leading on a lawsuit against some of the large chemical manufacturers that were part of the use of PFAS or PFOAs, those forever chemicals that are such a problem in our water and really hard to clean up and deal with. And so he's going forward with the lawsuit. So, good things. Okay. Oh boy, this is the fun part. I forgot to make a transition slide. So here we go. I might have to click. All right, I'm gonna come over here. All right, so okay, I'll read it first. Okay. So I was hoping that rather than me just tell you, here are all the things that you can do that are good for the environment. I figured some of you in this room are probably doing some of these things, all of these things, a few of these things. You've at least heard about them, and it would be really it wouldn't be worth your time for me to just stand here and tell you a laundry list of things that you could do. It would be better to hear from each other what we actually are doing already, or what we have hopes for. And maybe there'll be some brainstorming that comes out of this room and we say, oh yeah, I had never thought about doing that. Great idea. So let's try to have some great ideas together. Protecting air quality. Air quality is really intertwined with climate goals. But it can be a separate issue as well. Air quality is also something that we're all very aware of this summer, aren't we? As we're dealing with smoke from Canadian wildfires. So what are some of the things that we personally here in Maryland, we in our households can do for air quality? And I'm going to try out this live poll. For those of you who want to follow along, I think it's going to bring up a QR code, and then you can like click all the things that you already do. Let's see if it works. Fingers crossed. Come on, internet. Work faster. Maybe it did it. Do you think it unhotspotted me? Oh. I'm so sad if it doesn't work. Says it's still on. We'll give it a refresh. Here we go. Oh. Okay, I'm gonna. Let's see. Somebody tell me if that QR code alerts and all the way over there.
Mine works. Livepolls.app.
Oh, there we go. You just gotta get it. In front of us. Ooh, look at that. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's really good. That's right. Okay, and for people who just want to play along in their head, you can do that too. The suggestions that I gave to just start off the conversation are reduce driving trips. So the less we use our car, I mean, you're not driving an electric vehicle yet, then the less that we're producing emissions. That's helping. Also, I said, especially on code red days, right? And this is one of those times where, as you're taking this poll, I'll say, if you can affect policy at your workplace of employment, and you work at a place that maybe hasn't gone fully remote yet, but could be remote, you might encourage them to at least say, on code red days will be remote. Because the fewer cars that we put on the roads on those days, the less ground level ozone that we're creating, and the better we're doing for air quality for everybody. I hope my former employer is listening. I really want them to. All right. Yeah, so then using bicycles for transportation or just your leg, right? One. Driving an EV is yep.
Sorry, the lawnmower.
Yeah, I didn't put that on here, did I? See, brainstorming, I love it. And you know what, as I was driving here, I thought, I need to make sure that we talk about mowing.
Oh.
You're right, I didn't put it on this slide, but I love it, yes. And now there are a lot of options for electric mowers too.
Advance of gasoline, engines.
And right,
option.
some places are starting to even ban those engines.
Banning.
Well, no, not yet, but ooh, California goes first.
Right.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
What is going on? I mean, I've heard a lot of things about it, but haven't really been following it close enough. Gas cooking.
Yeah,
Insight on that, I would love to hear it.
I know, gas cooktops are, a flare point, what a terrible pun to use here.
It's a hot topic.
It's a really hot topic. They are in fact terrible for our indoor air quality, and it turns out that all this time we've been slowly poisoning ourselves that we live around them. But like anything that people have gotten used to and feel attached to in their personal lives, it's very hard to tell people to change and to convince them that they need to, because they think, I think, oh, well, my 92-year-old grandmother had a gas stove in her house her whole life and she lived to 92, so what's the problem? But studies have shown, in fact, really bad for indoor air quality. In addition, as I talked about that Empower program and some money coming out of the federal government, forgot about that. There's money coming down the pipe for people to start changing over to all electric. So I think it's going to be, I don't know how quickly a ban will happen because it's a small segment of energy of gas use. But what we will start seeing is new buildings being required to be all electric. And that's going to be the way to address. Yeah.
So that will take care of gas water heaters. It will take care of gas backup heat on heat pumps. This will.
Yeah.
Working towards it.
Exactly. The thing to be working towards and the thing.
The gas. I guess gas heat pump would be it. No.
gas heat pump.
Yeah, heat pumps tend to be all electric.
Gas backup.
People might have gas backups in their home, but the backup option is going to start being battery.
You understand that you're going up against the gas lobbies.
Yeah.
Who have, who
I
have hired
do.
millions of dollars.
But look at me.
Yeah.
You.
Exactly.
All right, let's see. How do I go back to the?
Brilliant thing that was good.
PowerPoint. Okay. So then I wanted to talk about not just what we do in our own homes, but, and you guys already sort of started heading in this direction. What do we also do on a community level? Because the one thing that I hate about sustainability talks, when it puts it all on you as an individual, is like, go home just feeling like a total burden. And I can't do all that. And that's out of my control, or like, life is hard enough, lady. Why are you telling me to also give up my gas stove? Okay, I don't want to be that person. So I want us to also think about the collective action we can take, because collective action both feels better because you're doing it with other people, and it gets more done, right? So this is the, if we want to go far, go together. And so some of the things that we can be doing right now, I just threw up some ideas of things that I've been working on or we've been advocating for. Electric school buses. There are opportunities for municipalities to get money, for school boards to get money right now for electric school buses. For me, this is a really important issue because I put my daughter on a school bus every day. And every day I look at how the diesel exhaust is right at her face level. I just think that can't be good. Let's change that out. And there are also municipalities moving to more electric buses, or at least hybrid buses in their fleets to really reduce those emissions. So you can encourage those things. You can encourage design as projects are coming into your communities, especially if they are developments where they have to come and talk to the community about their development. You can push on those designs to say, we want it to be more walkable, more friendly to people getting there by bikes and legs and not as much by cars. I look at places that have all these, where the parking lot is in the front, And there's no sidewalk, and maybe if we had designed it with a sidewalk along the whole street and the parking lot in the back, it gives that impression of you can just walk up to this business. You don't have to bring your car to it. Yeah,
Seems to me that that's gonna require, that sort of thing is gonna require action on the county level. So that developers are not given a carte blanche to put these kinds of things
yes.
in that we have seen in the past.
And one of the things on that is parking lot size, right? So there have been studies that show that we don't need as big a parking lot that we've required, and if you just have to remove the language for minimum parking lot size, and you start getting smaller parking lots that are more appropriate to the size of the building and the amount of use that the building's getting.
But basically, my observation is that the counties, particularly Anne Arundel County, have not done enough to rein in developers who continue to put these things before the county, the county council to get approval for things that are going to increase traffic, going to increase air pollution, are not sustainable in the long run. And yet we keep allowing them to do this over and over again. And it seems to me this is an opportunity for the state to step in and restrict the power of counties to do these sorts of things. And in particular, Annapolis is a prime example because they are allowed to annex property from the county and then develop it using their own criteria, which are not as stringent as the other counties, and keep expanding these kinds of developments, which are, are antithetical to these kinds of goals. And it seems this is going to have to be solved at the state level. So I would, if the league wants to do something, one thing is to take away the power of municipalities to annex lands that are adjacent to them and bring them into these so that they can expand development. And it's been going on for a long time in this county, and I'm sure it's happening in other places as well.
Let me ask a question of the room. How many of you know your county council person? How many of you have spoken to your county council person in the last 6 months? Okay, that's pretty good. So you've got a room full of people here who are very active on the local level and staying in touch with their local elected officials.
Why they're here.
That's right. And just a reminder that we all have power, right? So if we start feeling like there is no opportunity for us and the only thing to do is to get somebody else to do it and do it on a bigger level than we can do it, we're not going to get anywhere. And so I appreciate your feelings because I have also driven around Maryland and thought to myself, when did I move to New Jersey? Sorry, New Jersey.
Don't knock it. I'm from Jersey. It doesn't all look fun. It doesn't all look like,
I just vacationed in New Jersey a month ago. It's a beautiful place.
Got to get away from this turnpike.
Couple of buses that they clean bus, think they're hydrogen powered.
No.
Does the
Not yet.
electrifying bus bill allow those as well?
There are, I know in the Inflation Reduction Act, in the funding that was in there for school buses, that they did include hydrogen, trying to account for especially like some of the rural counties that make the electric school buses may just not be the technology for them just yet, but they can still switch over from diesel. So yes.
Hi, very good presentation. Thank you so much. My question is around trash, and that's not talking about trash. We pick up a lot of trash in Annapolis, and I actually have a email draft right now to go to city council that, we don't have enough trash cans even at the bus stops, and there's just trash everywhere. And we need to, I think what we should be proposing is that if you're the inhabitant of the space, so Because right now, like, we're all looking to say, well, we don't own the building, it's not our responsibility. I'm like, but it's your parking lot, right? Or, Annapolis is saying, well, we don't have enough people to go pick up the trash that are around the bus stop. Well, no, you own that plot of land, you're responsible, and a resident should be responsible for their plot, right?
Yeah.
And keep it clean and trash. Trash is such a big problem in the state. And I don't understand why we're not specifically talking about trash. Now, Anne Arundel just took care of the plastic bags, but the city hasn't. And then straws, I mean. come on.
Yes, and in fact, I have an email from a gentleman who's active with the Sierra Club here in Anne Arundel County, who helped to work on the plastic bag ban. And they have a whole suite of legislation that they want to see go forward in Anne Arundel County, and they think they have support for that will build on the plastic bag ban. And instead of automatically getting a plastic straw, you have to request a straw. It's not like you can't have one, you just have to ask for it rather than it be automatic. And the same thing with plastic there, with all those sort of single-use plastics to make it, an opt-in versus a default, right? So that is one of the things that is happening right now. I have also strong feelings on trash, but I also want to help you reframe your assumptions on trash, because for years, I worked in small communities and low-income communities that just trash is like the thing that we always felt like we were beating our heads on. There's just trash everywhere, and why aren't people more responsible? And recently I've been paying attention to the argument that single-use plastic came into our lives as a result of businesses that decided to make things in single-use plastic containers and didn't have to have the responsibility of what was going to happen to those containers. There was no responsibility on the producer for how they would be taken back, if they were recyclable, what they were made of, what that mattered. And so there's an effort now to push back on producers, and not, again, this is like that individual action versus community action versus who's responsible. Well, it's not always just the individual consumer, but it's also the fact that we allow a system where a producer can put something out and then it's your problem once it's out there. And so there was a bill that passed this year that I didn't put in the presentation, but there was a bill for extended producer responsibility. It didn't pass as an actual bill yet, but it passed as a task force. So it's a step. And it's a step in the direction to start looking at how we as the state of Maryland can put more onus on the producers of the things that are hard to recycle, that fill up our landfills, that cover our streets and litter. And so it's not just left on the individual consumer. And I still think people should just pick up their trash. I don't disagree with you. And I remember traveling in Mexico City and being shocked at how clean it was. I expected it to be a lot dirtier there, but everywhere that I went, I saw the individual owners of spaces cleaning very carefully and thoughtfully, even cleaning their front doors and the things that we take for granted and don't tend to clean in this country. And I can't explain the why on that one, but I do think it's a both and.
Do you have more slides?
I do.
Okay, guys, can we let her get through the rest of the slides and then do the Q&A at the end of the presentation? Then I can hand the microphone around so people on Zoom can hear.
True.
All right.
Sorry.
Back to your schedule.
About that. Okay, so we have two more interactive slides, one coming up now. Here we go. Oh, no, I lied. Hold on. One more topic before interactive. On the climate footprint, I decided to include this picture rather than give you a laundry list, because there are so many different things we can do on your climate footprint. But now I'm going to tell you something, and this is a homework assignment. Go to Dr. Sarah Baya's website at some point this week and check out all of the many amazing resources she has on climate. She works for University of Maryland. She's with the extension, and every summer she does a webinar series. You can sign up for her webinar series, and she goes over the, not just the, like the 101s of climate, what is it, what's it causing it, what do we know about it, but she also digs into policy, and she is a very engaging woman. Great to hear. I have nothing on her, so go listen to her presentations. She has them all archived on her website. The website is called climatecorner.org. And I'm happy to also, if you forget all of this and just want to email me later, I'll send you to it. Okay. But this is where I pulled this image from, although it's made by Dr. Jane Genovese. Saying that right? And talks about all the many things. You could plant trees and eat less meat and just use less stuff in general, and also buy local food, and also electrify your home and hang out your washing to dry. And you could think about how you travel differently, and you could put your money in things that don't pollute. And so there's lots of things. And then that one thing on the side, which is this one. Oh, I didn't get to use that this whole time. This whole section is my favorite section, right? Be a catalyst. So be part of that larger change, like we're talking about on the community level. And now I'm going to cause more trouble in conversation. So on your community level, what are some of the actions that we can take? Many of the things we just said on the air quality slide are also climate actions. What are things that we can do? I decided to just stick with one bullet for right now. It's something I'm really focused on. There is a lot of money coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act that is focused on climate, but it's all carrots. And if we don't take it, if we don't go and eat those carrots, nothing good will come out of it. On the flip side, if we do, a lot of climate change action is going to happen as a result of all of that funding that is made available. So encourage your local elected officials to find out about that funding. You can send them to me. And make sure that they are doing everything that they need to do to get that funding here to Maryland, so we can implement all these things that we say, gee, that sounds like a good idea, but it also sounds really expensive. Right, and here we go. It's water time. Yep, here we go. Okay. All right. Streams and bay. What can we do to protect our streams and bay? And again, my options, I gave you driveless, conservation landscaping. There's some. You could have rain barrels, a rain garden. You can participate in the Maryland Grow Oysters program if you're a waterfront homeowner. Lucky you. You could recycle your oyster shell.
Yeah.
If you have a boat, you could use a certified Maryland clean marina. And if your marina is not, you could talk to them about the program and figure out what they need to do to be one. You can avoid illicit discharge. And in mind, I had my neighbors that like to wash their car right in front of the gutter. Put the stove down in the gutter. And oh yeah, pick up after your lovely pooch. There's more, but those are my top ones that came to mind. All right. Participation in this one. I thought this might be a big participatory slide. What else? What did I forget? Make Jesse mad, shout out a couple. Don't push your trash down the storm drain. Does anyone put anything in their washing machine or have a filter on their home clothes washing machine? I had a device and it broke, so I can't put my hand up anymore. Okay, filter on your washing machine. Why do we put filters on our washing machines now?
Microphone.
Because we're worried about the microplastics coming out of our clothes. No. Right. Well, fun. guys are so good at this. Hey, I didn't even talk to you about these things. We already do them all. Okay, and on our community level, and definitely what you all are already active in, so I don't need to tell you all these things, but let's talk about them anyway. Oh, installing green stormwater infrastructure. You're doing that. Planting trees. Recycling is not the answer, but trees are always the answer. That's my motto. Protect our existing forests, not just planting trees. Supporting living shoreline installations. This is something that I'd like to see focused on more, but you and Anne Arundel County are already doing a pretty good job of that. You actually have a county benefit for living shoreline. You were one of the few. Well done. Wastewater treatment, maintaining it to a really high standard. You're following the news. I live up near Back River, so this was big for me this year. My neighbors all got really worried about whether or not they could swim. The answer was usually no. And also something you do here, share your love of the Severn River. Don't forget that sharing a resource with somebody and bringing them in to the reasons you love it, telling stories and giving them access to that thing will also help to inspire them to conserve it. And
Okay, I do have a lapel mic that if anybody has a question, I can bring it to you. You can see if it works. Testing. It might take a little minute.
It's working.
Yeah. All right. I know we got through a fairly robust Q&A period earlier.
Yeah. We kind of broke the- Anyone else? Questions?
Yeah.
And then we'll hear those, so people will be on.
Does anybody or has the state of Maryland looked at hydrogen fuel stations versus using lithium battery?
I'm gonna say probably, and I'm also gonna say that is out of my wheelhouse. But I do know that the PSC is tasked with looking at lots of options. And that will be, well, I imagine there's going to be a lot of very robust discussion coming out of the PSC in the next year. So I would follow that if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, it's,
That makes sense.
Don, I'm not even sure if that'll come late or.
Yeah, just a question in regards to the infrastructure needed for the offshore wind. Baltimore is the obvious place in Maryland, to set down. I think they've started something.
Yeah.
They're supporting that and
Yes.
subsidizing some of that.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's a serious, that's 500 jobs.
Yes, you're right. There's a lot of jobs in wind. And I don't know the details on agreements with financially what's happening on the state level, but there is a lot of money coming in for jobs. Sparrows Point, the Trade Point Atlantic site is going to be one of those, like you said, the sites where they put together parts of the turbine before they ship it out to offshore, because it has the deep water port, it has the space. And so we're actually very excited about that on a local level. And I attended the offshore wind, the Business Network for Offshore Wind hosted their conference in Baltimore this March. And a couple of us attended one day of it. And I will just say that there's a lot of industry around offshore wind that was beyond what I even thought or imagined. But one of the things I'm most excited about seeing us technologically develop and really come into is the floating offshore wind platforms. And I really hope that there's people working on it. There are really smart people working on it. And let's hope that we can actually see that move forward, because I think it reduces the amount of invasion that we have to do in the offshore space.
I don't know if this is working. Oh, it is. So thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I just have a quick question. It's not so much a specific issue based, but more like process and Maryland LCV based. So I'm just curious about as far as creating legislation and working with different stakeholders, you work with legislators, you work with other nonprofits like Sierra Club. You do any kind of interaction with private industry, restoration groups?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
all of the above, especially this year on the community solar bill, for example, there were a number of solar developers who were involved in that because it is in their interest to have more opportunity for bringing solar to Maryland. So they were part of the coalition that was talking about and developing that legislation. And I mean, it's no secret that Maryland LCD has been getting sponsorship from some of the companies developing offshore wind. And so we are friendly with them and talking to them. Like I said, I went to the Business Network for Offshore Wind conference one day this year. So yes, all of the above.
Great.
Right here.
I also really enjoyed the presentation, so thank you. I have a question about, like, which would be a preferable scenario? A forest of 500 acres with all native species, or a forest of 1,000 acres with invasives peppered in?
I love that question. That's the kind of question that keeps me up at night. So, I'm going to say probably, and now I'm gonna get myself in trouble with all of the.
You can't answer that.
Okay, great. You're recording, okay.
It's still.
1,000 acres. It's 1,000 acres with the caveat that there are some invasions of invasive species that are more detrimental to forest health and then the forest succession than others. So I just had a Maryland, we had a Choose Clean Water Coalition call today, and Katie Lauder leads Baltimore Green Space, and I had her present to everybody about a study that they had done with UMBC on forest patches in Baltimore City. And they were looking at the health of those forest patches, and they created a protocol for analyzing the amount of invasion and what types of invasives are coming into those forest patches. And one of the things that they see is things like English ivy as it's not a canopy thing, but it does start to affect the health of the trees. And then because it's so good at taking over the ground cover and really being a single species over the ground cover, as it reduces the health of those trees fall, there's also nothing to come up underneath them. So the longevity of those forests stands are not as great as something that's a sustained native forest.
But I gotta ask, so does
Okay.
the state
Love this.
have any plans? I mean, is there anybody talking about, English ivy? Because it just makes Annie and I completely nuts.
Yes, there
to
are
see
people.
this take.
One thing I would recommend, if I'm here to recommend some advocacy, there used to be someone at the Department of Natural Resources who was entirely focused on invasive species. And I believe that person is no longer there. I think it was a retirement and then they didn't refill the position. So let's advocate for that position being refilled and maybe actually a couple extra positions behind them, because just one seems like not enough. And it's a big topic, but I will also, because I love challenging people on this, challenge you to read a book called Rambunctious Garden. And it will challenge all your thoughts and assumptions on invasive species. And then you'll stand here like me going, well.
One other thing, and I'll just chime in on this, is that English ivy isn't listed as a tier 1 invasive by the state, which is why it's still able to be sold. As an ornamental. And that, I believe, is a Maryland Department of Ag process. I was just looking into this the other day when I saw it at a nursery. So it's something that, and there's only like 3 or 4 that are not allowed to be sold. So Oriental bittersweet, Japanese honeysuckle, all these, you could buy them if somebody wanted to sell them. So that,
For bleach ones?
no.
It is a tier 2.
So.
30% vinegar. It works great.
Sorry, that's done.
Yes, I mean, that's another advocacy
Yeah.
avenue to go down is to get these things lifted, so we can't keep pouring them into the ecosystem.
Great
Could
point.
we start a petition of some sort? for
There's a process
through the
for it.
IRA?
Yeah, there's a process for it, and I still have the tab up on my phone, so I only was discovering this the other day. But I haven't gotten around to making it into a,
Weed warriors, yeah, there are plenty of people out there.
yeah.
Yeah, you could get a lot of signers onto that.
Back here.
And round up to that. So the, one of the questions or another concern that I have, that happens a lot in our neighborhood is our neighbors are just taking trees down. Right, and they're not replanting. I'm happy to walk anybody through our neighborhood doing that practice. And I keep telling my city council and my, all the women and county council, there just seems to be this lack of education around that, right? So there's one issue there. There's also, people act like they need support and how do I care for my tree? So they're not doing the proper pruning and then the tree dies, right? But I think what's so frustrating, and I work from home, is I get knocks on the door by people, by for-profit organizations that want to take my tree down. And it's a very competitive business. And they act like they're arborists, but they're not, right? Your tree, that something's gonna happen, it's gonna destroy your house and you need to take it down. I'm like, you know what you're talking about, move on to the next place. But they do move on to the next place. It's very predatory. And getting back to your earlier point about trash, we should be preventing these tree cutters from going door to door and put it back on the developer or put it back on someplace else so that the neighbors don't just keep taking other trees down.
Yeah.
Or not doing a proper care for their tree first,
Yeah.
before they take it down.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I did not know about that. And that sounds like.
I'm
should be addressed.
And they act like they're not, they didn't know, oh, I didn't know I needed to do that, or you needed a proper permit. But in some of the older neighborhoods where they're redoing these homes, they're just pulling all the little trees down and then planting a twig, which affects someone.
Yes.
It's something, it's something, I think that most of you probably know already, but a couple of years ago, the legislature passed a bill which took away the power of homeowners associations to dictate the kind of plants you can have in your yard. And because we've had a lot of situations where they would go around and tell you your grass has got to be 4 inches long, blah, blah, blah. They no longer have that authority. This is the only state where such a bill has been passed. And I would like to see environmental organizations do more to educate people that they have the power to put whatever the hell they want in their yard on that. Trees are among those things which would be first on the list. My experience with, I call them the tree butchers. They come around, BG&E being one of the chief tree butchers in this part of the world. Coming around, trying to convince you that you really need their services, blah, blah, blah. Most of them wouldn't know a tulip tree from a tulip plant. And so I would encourage people to plant natural gardens in the yard, starting with both overstory trees, understory trees, and then you can go on and plant other things underneath that would be attractive to pollinators and so forth. One of the issues with the air pollution is to have more trees and more natural vegetation around. And I don't know what Annapolis is like in terms of getting permits to cut trees down. But that's something that probably be willing.
If at all.
Yeah, sounds too good.
I feel like one more.
I will briefly say while you're moving the mic that your point about trees in general brings up the fact that one of the things left undone is that most of our forests are actually privately held, right, privately owned. And so figuring out ways, incentives and plans to encourage people to continue to save and protect the forests that they own is going to be a really important part of maintaining our forest cover in Maryland.
Just a quick change of topic. At least in Anne Arundel County, I think the biggest issue is commercial. Is how do you make it possible for businesses to economically adopt paper straws, not using styrofoam, trying to get some solar on all these commercial roofs. Right now, it's ridiculously expensive and prohibitive to do that, and that's part of that, part of the national bill and part of the state that isn't addressing our enormous hospitals, the government complexes in the area. Those are all opportunities, but it's extremely expensive.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of square acres and huge potential. So you can pass the laws or help the middle to low income folks, but they don't own their places. How do you get a landlord who owns 100 properties? How do you make it economical for that landlord to do solar? So putting it out there, it's a big issue in everyone's county itself.
Yeah, no, that's a very fair issue. I think that is something that is left to be addressed.
All right.
Can you do a 60-second recap of what we did the opening for a handful of people
Yeah,
that came in, and then we can wrap up officially?
Yeah, hey, so a couple of updates from SRA are we recently won a grant for some restoration design of small scale stormwater practices at a condo, getting to your point of condominium complex in Annapolis and the Georgetown East community. And we started our floating classrooms program, which takes kids out on the river and gets them exposed to water quality measurement, data collection and analysis, and how we impact what goes on in the water. So, you know, we do that. We do this program because of private support from donors. We're going to send out a survey tomorrow with a link to the recording of this that also will have questions about the event and the link to donate. So please do support SRA. And I think with that,
That's it. And then we will keep you posted on our next speaker. But like I said, Nancy Lawson should be our next speaker in the fall.